So I'm talking to John Bismuth today, who's a pretty competitive pinball player aficionado. Hi, John. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for talking to me. I think some people would be interested in some of the skill versus luck uh, elements in pinball. So,
hmm
so I guess we'll start off asking, what's your experience been like in the pinball world? How competitive have you been, and how skilled are you on the ranking of things?
Yeah, so I started playing pinball maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, and back then it was pinball was not as popular, and there wasn't many tournaments or anything going on. But quickly after I got into it, there was a league that opened up in my area, the DMV Pinball League, and I live in Maryland, so. Um, there was a pinball league that opened up between Baltimore and DC, and I joined that, and I've been playing for maybe 5 or 6 seasons, and I took a couple seasons off. So I have a national ranking, and I've been playing pinball for I guess a little while now.
Nice. What was your highest ranking?
I think I was in the um, don't quote me on this. I'm looking it up. I think I was in the top maybe 10,000. So yeah, not extremely
Right, right.
super high ranking,
But
but
but you're in the you're in the community, and that's why I thought it'd be interesting to talk to you. You obviously have a lot more knowledge than your average person, for sure.
yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
yeah, one of the things we talked about yesterday was that I thought was interesting. A lot of people don't have a sense of like how much skill is involved in pinball. Like I was initially thinking like, oh, it might be like poker where, a very good pinball player might win, just a few more rounds over time than a less skilled pinball player. But you made it sound like it was a very big discrepancy. There can be a very big edge for very good players. Can you talk a little bit about how good players can be and how badly they can beat less skilled players?
Right.
Yeah.
So there is this misconception about pinball because originally pinball was not a skilled game. There was no flippers, and you would just pull the plunger, and as hard as you would pull it, it would hit in certain areas, but the probability of and the amount of control you had was very low. Well, they introduced flippers, and from then on, it was an extremely skilled game. Um, every table is its own kind of equation and kind of puzzle for you to figure out. Of course, you can look it up online, and people compare strategies online, but in reality, it's also based on um, what you think you can do on the machine. There's a lot of risk and reward on pinball, and that's based on the lanes that you try to hit. Basically, you have two flippers, and those are your two. They serve as both the attacking and the defending, as I like to think about it. Because if it drains, you lose your ball, right?
Hmm.
So, but you have an extraordinary amount of control with each flipper. Um, skilled players can hit every location, each location, 100% of the time, pretty much. Like they can get the extremely hard skill shots, and they can hit any lane they want. And so when you have that much amount of control, then all of a sudden it's not that much luck.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and the best machines are actually the ones with very, very, very little luck. They're Okay, so there was this.
Sure.
So early on, there was something called electromagnetic machines, and there
Hmm.
were the old timey big machines that you would hear with. They would click a lot, and they would sound like bells going off.
Hmm.
Uh, and and because they were mechanical, partially, they didn't have a lot of flexibility, and the modes that you could jump into, there weren't many. But what happened in the 70s is they started introducing electric or solid state machines. And what solid state machines could do is that they basically had a computer chip inside. So all of a sudden you could trigger different modes. So for
Mm.
example, one of the most famous pinball machines, Adam's Family, has many different modes, and it's each mode is a in the theme of the game is a room in the house, and for each mode you have to accomplish different goals.
Mm.
So in one mode you might have to go and hit the side lane over and over again. In another mode you might have to hit a certain other part of the machine, or do a flipper, or within a time limit, hit three different lanes in three different areas, or
Hmm.
the lanes might change. So all of a sudden, you have a lot more control and a lot more variability, which makes it a lot more interesting, and
Hmm.
a lot of both tactile skill and knowledge skill, because every machine is so extremely different.
Right. You had mentioned the we'll talk about the tilt thing because that's something that poker and pinball both have in common. Some people might not know that's where the tilt phrase comes from, is from the tilt
Mm.
display in pinball. Uh,
Right.
so, and you had talked about how there's even a skill to being able to push the machines without activating the tilt, going into effect.
Hmm.
Is that right? Yeah. So just is it just knowing the limits of specific machines or knowing the limits in general?
Right. So actually, every machine has a tilt sensor built in, and that's for people to not destroy the machines, not to take advantage of it, and not to cheat the game.
Hmm.
Right. Um, but you can set the sensitivity to whatever you want. So certain people, if you're an operator of a machine, you could keep it very low or keep it very high. It depends on what you want to do. I think in tournaments it's pretty standard to keep it at a certain rate, but knowing that limit and testing, going to that very edge um, without pushing it over, without tilting, is a very important skill for any pro player to
Hmm.
know, because basically there are shots in pinball and in every table that can cause an automatic drain, and
Mm.
when you drain, you lose your ball, and it's the next person's turn.
Hmm.
If you tilt it, which means if you hit it, there's a couple ways to tilt it. You can shake the machine. You can hit it from one side or the other, and then there's other strategies for what people. There's different strategies for what you can do. But if you tilt the machine, you can avoid a drain pretty easily, because if it's going down the center and you hit it to the left or to the right, it's going to hit your flipper instead, and then you have an opportunity to
Mm.
put it back in play.
Mm. You mean to push the machine without tilting it, or to actually tilt it?
So when you hit the machine and you're putting the ball back in play,
Uh-huh.
you have to hit it with enough force to for it to change its trajectory, but without too much force. Because if you hit it with too much force, then you're going to tilt out the machine, and then the ball stops in an auto drain.
Right, gotcha. Yeah.
Right.
So just
Yeah.
knowing that limit. How
Yeah.
often? So if a good player is playing, like a pro level player, are they pushing the machine a lot? Like that's a common thing that's happening
Yes,
during the game.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They can be, yeah, they can. You'll see in tournaments, people will tilt.
Hmm.
A lot of times it's a desperation move.
Hmm.
It also, again, depends on the game. Some games, when you tilt, you still get your bonuses. At the
Mm.
end of the round, at the end of a ball is like a round for a pinball player. So at the end of that round, you build up bonuses, and then you build up multipliers on those bonuses. And some games even have that you will score way more points on your bonuses than you even will score throughout the actual gameplay in the machine,
Uh-huh.
in the actual the ball, going around the playfield.
Hmm.
Um, so it's again another strategy thing. Do you want to try to hit this machine? You see the ball draining really fast. Do you want to
Right.
try to hit this machine, and you
Risk
know there's a
risk tilt.
sensitive machine? Yeah,
Yeah. Right.
everything is based on risk reward, right? So
Right.
do you want to risk it?
Right.
And it again comes down to strategy.
Right.
If you know, like, oh, my bonuses are quite low, and the probability of like, and if I lose the bonus, it's not a big deal compared to if I keep this ball going,
Hmm.
then yeah, it's worth the risk. But these are the snap second decisions constantly you have to make.
Yeah, very very snap second judgments. Yeah, I can see where the skill would come in. You had mentioned something that was speaking of the skill versus luck factor. You had said you were playing some really high level player, and it would be very rare for you to even beat him in one game. So
Right. Yeah.
that's how extreme the edge can be, huh?
Yeah, and
Hmm.
I mean, with pinball, it's a very localized thing. There's only a certain amount of machines, and there's only certain places that can hold these machines. These machines are huge,
Hmm.
and also there was in the 90s and early 2000s, people it wasn't popular. People were just throwing away machines, and they were being destroyed, and there weren't many companies making them. So they are hard to come. They are a little harder to come by now. It's become a lot more popular, so there's a lot more pinball arcades and things like that. But you have to gather in a certain spot, and it's very regionalized.
Hmm.
So when it's so regionalized, you have pros playing against complete amateurs. You
Hmm.
have everyone in between. But I think that the national rankings take into account who you're playing against. So if you win against someone who hasn't played very much, you don't get as many points as if you win someone who's quite good.
In some games, like in Magic the Gathering, they'll try to level the playing field and try to make it more pure, like by doing random decks or like decks that players haven't played yet. Do they have any sort of equivalent in pinball where they try to level the playing field to try to like bring out like the pure skill element or something? I don't know how they would do that, but maybe like a brand new pinball machine or like a really blank like pared down pinball machine. Do you know about anything like that where they try to set that up?
I don't really know about leveling the playing field with
Hmm.
just a machine. I think there's leagues that, in our area they have a women's only league or they have an amateur league. So you can play in those things if you get intimidated by the competition. But it's I although it's a very competitive game, I feel like people are very cordial and very friendly and don't take it as seriously as you would expect.
Hmm.
A lot of times, at least in my area. So even playing against people who are quite good, you feel you're at a disadvantage, but you don't feel. But there's a lot to learn from that too. You can watch when you watch people play pinball, you actually become better at pinball, which
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
very strange.
That makes sense.
Um, um,
Yeah,
you know,
I
Go
was
ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah. I wonder if they ever do something like come out with a brand new. It'd be an interesting thing if they came out with a brand new pinball machine to have a competition, and then that way everybody's like at the same level where they're all trying to figure it out at the same time, and then
Yeah,
that'd be kind
yeah,
of
that
that'd
would
be
be
kind of cool.
interesting. So
Yeah.
what they can do with the solid state machines is that they can update the code. So there is some
Hmm.
machines that, especially, I'm going to point out one specific one called Bride of Pinbot, and Bride of Pinbot it's a very interesting, it's a very cool looking machine, but the actual gameplay itself is quite broken. There's only one shot that matters, and you just have to hit that over and over again. So
Hmm.
that doesn't make for a very fun game. So
Hmm.
what they did 20, 30 years later is that they came up with an update to the machine. So you can actually update the code in the machine, and all of a sudden you have a totally different game. All of a sudden, all the different lanes matter, and ramps matter, and spinners matter, as
Hmm.
opposed to just that one shot
One shot, right?
that was very, very important in Bride of Pinbot.
Hmm. Hmm. Awesome. Yeah, and then now I've got some questions that people sent in via Twitter. Let's go through a few of them here. Uh, Is there a standard evaluation that people do before playing the machine, maybe before a competition or something? Like if people notice the left paddle is less responsive, do they do anything to fix it, or do people just adjust their strategy?
I think if you play at a major convention, if you play at Pittsburgh, um, then they will fix that on the spot. They have technicians fixing it.
Hmm.
In our local hodgepodge, we do not fix it. We just know that that one has a bum, um, a right flipper,
Right.
or this game, or like in the middle of a game, in the middle of a round, a machine can just break down, and while we have skilled technicians that can fix it, we just move on to another machine usually because it just takes too much time to try to work on that.
Right. What was the name of that big one you said? Pin what?
Pittsburgh.
Pinsburg, and that's
It takes
in
place in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. That makes sense. Okay. Do you listen to Tommy's Pinball Wizard as a warm up before every match?
Not usually, um, but
Do,
that's a pretty cool song.
Yeah. Do people reference it very often, or does it not come up at all and people are sick of it?
Um, yeah, of course we all reference it. There's not a lot of pinball references in popular
Pop
media,
culture.
so
Yeah.
we try to use whatever we can.
Right. Right. Deaf, dumb, and blind kid. Yeah. That's a little insensitive. Lyrics. Uh, let's see. Has the gap between the flippers remained the same, and what has changed about the tables in general? Would
Oh,
you say?
that's a great question. Actually, yeah. So I think the gap is generally pretty standard. Now, there's a lot of variability within machines, and so there are machines with quite wide gaps, but they compensated in other ways, or it's part of the gameplay. There's also pinball machines generally come in a pretty standard um, uh, body size, but back in the 70s and 80s, Bally used to make these wide body machines, and they've come back. So pinball actually went through a couple of declines and popularity bumps, and one of the most recent one has found a lot of indie pinball manufacturers making machines, and one of the most popular and what kind of started this whole um, new era was is called Wizard of Oz, and this is a giant wide body machine.
Hmm.
Also, for the first time in pinball, it has an LCD screen that displays video, full video from Wizard of Oz. As you play the machine and you unlock different modes, you can go and videos will pop up explaining kind of what's going on or what shots to hit.
Hmm.
So there's that going on. I also just read that there is a completely modular pinball machine that just came out. And from what I understand, you can adjust the playing field and basically simulate different machines.
Hmm.
You can move where bumpers are, and you can move things like that. So there's a
Well, that's
lot
pretty
of
cool.
innovation coming out in pinball,
Hmm.
um, and really, it's because it's been so stagnant for so many years. Um, Basically, there was for over a decade there was only one pinball manufacturer making any machines, so they felt no need to innovate, and
Mm-hmm.
that company is Stern, and they
Mm-hmm.
would make every big license, Batman, Avengers pinball machine, but would always keep the same old technology from like the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
There's no competition, but since there's been a lot of new pinball manufacturers, there's actually a lot more innovation happening, and it's a very exciting time for pinball.
Gotcha. What's your favorite game if you had to pick one, or one of your top favorites?
I think one of the most iconic and probably one of the most fun and just pure joy games for me is Adam's Family Pinball.
Hmm.
That one is a classic. It's probably the most popular game,
Hmm.
but it's really fun and it's really cheeky and funny. And if you look at the themes of pinball, you can also see that there is a lot of really goofy themes and a lot of horror themes, which is right up my alley, and I think a lot of people's alley.
Mm-hmm.
Another one I would say is Medieval Madness, which has a castle that can kind of fall down in the middle of the game. You can knock down a castle,
Hmm.
and and actually, from newer machines, I really like the Ghostbusters machine. I thought that one was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, I mean, I'm just excited to play pinball. Doesn't matter the machine usually.
How much? Let's say you went out to play pinball at a arcade or whatever one evening. How much money would you expect to spend? What's a normal budget for like a few hours of playing, like a typical session?
It depends really on the arcade. I think in my area, I think for two people, it was like $10 for the hour. I just played around here, and it was a little bit more expensive, but I ended up getting a bunch of free games. But basically, I would say you can allow for maybe $10 an hour per person.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not picking the most expensive machines or if you're not at the most expensive arcade,
Mm-hmm.
there are amazing arcades which you can play by the hour, free play,
Hmm.
and that's what I highly recommend.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, if you just want to play whenever, there's the best app is actually a simulator of many famous machines, and it's just called Pinball Arcade. And I think
Huh.
you can get it on phones, and you can get it on any gaming device, and you can practice any machine and learn the strategies of many of the most popular and most famous
Oh,
machines.
that's
It's
pretty
great.
cool. Does that simulator? Does that do the mechanics work pretty realistically on this?
Exactly the
Yeah.
same. Yeah, I
Huh.
mean the physics seem good to me, and then but the most important thing is that the table is exactly the same. The strategies are the same,
Huh.
and you can really learn a machine pretty well digitally before you ever play it in real life.
That was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
How much money are people betting on pinball? How often is that going on?
Oh, betting? I don't really know. I think in my area there's a small local bet every day. I mean every league session, so maybe
Hmm.
once a week, and it's not much. It's $5 or whatever
Uh-huh.
to get in, and the winner takes all. But I think it can range. I don't really know about the gambling aspect of it too much.
Hmm. Yeah, you don't know of any degenerate pinball players who've lost their mortgage, lost their
No,
house
no.
from pinball. Okay,
Uh,
just curious.
I think it's like a competition scene. I think you pay to enter, and then the winner takes takes the money and takes the cup, and
Hmm.
then there's just a lot of trading within the scene, a lot of trading and selling and repairing and stuff like that. So that's where the money lies, I would
Well,
say.
yeah, I guess it makes sense because if it's so clearly, like you said, a skill based game, and the better players are so obvious, it's not like poker where the skill is kind of hidden. So
Hmm.
there wouldn't be people willing to put much money on it because they would quite obviously be beaten so easily. So
Yeah,
it helps
that's true.
explain. Yeah, if it had more luck in it, I can see where you might have some people like, oh, I think I'm better than you. I think I'm better than you. But yeah, that does make sense considering that it's the skill is probably quickly apparent. But I wonder
Yeah.
if there's I do wonder if there's some parts of the country where people are like hustling pinball or something, like acting like, oh, they start out playing badly. That'd be kind of funny. I've never seen that depicted, so it probably doesn't happen. But
No, yeah, I don't know. I bet it's pretty hard to fake playing badly. I don't know, like when you watch these pros, you can just see them hit every shot, and they rarely get kind of they miss the shots that make sense. Like they lose when it makes sense. They don't really lose just on basic things.
mhm.
You don't see that happen very often.
Right, yeah, we need a remake of the Hustler, but with pinball instead of billiards. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned Gorgar. How much do you love that
Oh,
talking
that's a great
arcade? Yeah.
machine. Yeah, I
Have you
love that one. That one's really cool.
have you
Again, go ahead.
have you played? You've played on it?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely. I played. There's a on Pinball Arcade. There's Gorgar, and then also I played in real life.
Mm.
I love finding these old machines because they're it's quite a scavenger hunt. Whenever you go
Hmm.
to a new place, whenever I go on vacation,
Hmm.
I usually hit up the pinball map and
Hmm.
try to see what machines are in the area and see if there's anything I haven't played in a while or anything I've never played, and that's always exciting.
Is there
Um,
a where do you find the pinball map? Is that
there's
a
a couple
website?
apps,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, there's a couple apps, and there's a website where people are tracking it um, because like I said, it's pretty rare and pretty hard to find. And a lot of people keep using the private collections, and so they don't really. There's not a ton of public places to play
Hmm.
weirder, older machines like Gorgar or um, what
Gotcha.
have you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Let's see. So it sounds like you're saying you think right now there's a little upswing in interest in pinball. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
That's cool.
definitely. You can see it in pinball prices, and you can see it in the amount of companies that are coming out, new companies that are coming out with different ideas for machines, and so that's where it's really reflected. Because not even a little over a decade ago, people were throwing these machines away. Now you can't buy a decent machine for under 2K, I think.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you can buy something, but you can't buy something that people really want for under that amount, I would say.
Right.
Um,
You said you had bought you had a Terminator arcade, right?
right.
That you got for like 1,200 or something like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
got it for like
Hmm.
1,200, and I sold it for 18.
Hmm.
After a couple years,
Hmm.
so the want is there, the buyers are there, and
Hmm.
again, they're such large, intricate machines that it is really expensive to produce. It's really expensive to start a company
Hmm.
and to have the backers necessary and to ship them out. To move these things is so difficult. So. It just increases the value of it. And I think I can see it continuing to increase in value for the foreseeable future.
That's cool. Okay, so this has been John Bismuth, and who lives in Baltimore. Do you have anything else you want to talk to us about? Anything interesting that we hadn't talked about?
No, I just say go to arcade, give it a try. It's a lot more interesting than you would expect, and download that app. That app is great.
Yeah, that's
Pinball
pretty
Arcade.
cool. I'd like to check that out. Yeah, I've always been horrible at pinball, and yeah, they go straight down the middle. I've never got the hang of it, but I'm interested. I recognize that there's a lot of skill there, so I'm always open to giving them a try.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, thanks for talking to me, John.
Thanks for having
All
me.
right, later.